You're listening to Win-Win, an entrepreneurial community with your host, Ben Wolf.
And welcome to the Win-Win Podcast, the official podcast of Wolf's Edge Integrators. I'm Ben Wolf, as always, your host. And we're going to be talking with our guest today about aligning faith or purpose with professional success. And before we get into introducing our guest today, I just want to share with you a resource. As you know, you guys as our audience are primarily business owners. And so I want to share a resource that we have for free on our website, wolfsedgeintegrators.com/resources, several tools, including a roadmap that you could get, which is a simplified version of actually the one that our experienced COOs on our team are using with our clients that you could use in your own business to help track the path from where you are now to how to get where you want to be, have a more self-managing business. There's a video guide on how to use the roadmap. You can get that. You can get a free chapter of my book, Fractional Leadership, Landing Executive Talent You Thought Was Out of Reach, along with some other good resources there that will be available to you. So I just want to make that available to you, wolfsedgeintegrators.com/resources. And with that, I want to get introducing our guest today. He is a faith-driven executive coach, author, and host of the Seek, Go, Create podcast, who was also kind enough to have me on that podcast a couple of months ago. He is the author of a novel called Coach, A Story of Success Redefined, which you could find a link to in the episode description and in the social media. And with that, I give you Tim Winders, and you could learn more about him at timwinders.com, WINDERS.com. Welcome, Tim.
Great to be here, Ben. Good to talk to you again. I enjoyed the conversation we had a little while back and before we hit record here. So excited to talk to you.
And absolutely great to reconnect. And for those who don't already have an introduction to you, we're talking about aligning faith or purpose with one's definition of professional success or with one's definition of success. Let's just call it that. Before we get into that, if you can give us a quick 2-minute background or history sort of on where you came from, how we got to be talking about this topic today.
Yeah, I think I'm one, like most of us, that my journey has been all about trying to identify what my purpose is, why am I here, what am I trying to accomplish, and all that. And most of mine started. Both my parents were educators. I grew up in the South, in the Atlanta, Georgia area, but I realized early on that being an educator was not going to be financially rewarding. I figured out that we weren't as well off as I thought we were. And so I decided I went to Georgia Tech, got an engineering degree. I actually started my first business while I was at Georgia Tech. And I was just wanting to make me some money, worked corporate, had a few companies, businesses, things like that. But everything kind of kept pulling me back to teaching, coaching. I just really had kind of an educator gene. And some people that are listening in know that they learn things so that they could then teach and share with other people. That's kind of the way I'm wired. And so we've had a number of businesses over the years. And I think the most pertinent thing to the story is that we had companies that were valued 7 figures. We held over right at 20 million in real estate heading into 2008, Ben. And so I think and I'm going to go ahead and give the real quick ugly of it. 2008 hit, we had 3 companies doing very well. Everything's looked nice. By 2013, my wife and I literally were homeless and bankrupt. And we had a little bitty Honda van that we put some of our stuff in and started traveling. It's been over 10 years ago now. Now we've been restored financially, but it really caused a lot of questions about what is success? What am I really trying to accomplish? What am I supposed to do? What are my skills? What are my talents? And so that's how's that for a good get started 2-minute intro?
Well, that's quite the hook. I mean, obviously you had to live through it, so it wasn't easy. But before that crash in '08, what was life like? How did you define success at that time?
I would like to say, because I was somewhat of I was a person of faith at that time, but I was probably a compartmentalized person of faith. I probably had my business and what I was working on and things here in one compartment, and then faith would have been in another compartment. And that's the way a lot of people, function that are in faith, that would like to claim or say that they've got some degree of faith. And so I would say that I measured success by comparing myself to others. And we did that with the 6,000 square foot house that we lived in, with the cars that were in the garage. I was very, very proud to say that we lived in one of the top golf course communities, literally in the world. It was 117 holes of golf, not far from Augusta, Georgia, things like that. I mean, it was something that would roll off my tongue. And I'm even careful now, it's coming off. I'm like, oh, yeah, that's where we live. And
Pride.
yeah, it's a lot of pride. You're absolutely right, Ben. And so a lot of my measurement for success were those tangible items. And so that's the thing that I think that I've been working to purge or redefine now since that time. And I think I'm still in that process. I don't think it's one of these things that we arrive at and go, oh, look, I'm now 60 years old and I've figured it out. And so now I'm going to live the rest of my life, at peace and with who I am and what I'm doing in the world. No, I think it's a constant thing that we evaluate as we go through life.
I mean, I can only imagine if you and your wife or got your stuff sort of living out of a van by 2013, don't have the house, don't have the golf course, the cars. And so all of those markers of success that you previously defined, you lost them. So like, what was the journey of, like, I guess, what was the journey of figuring out a new definition? Yeah, well, I'll save sort of, I have a follow-up question, I think, but
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, maybe kind of the root level thing, Ben, is what was my identity? I thought this is going to be so good for some people listening in. I really thought that I was a really, really good business guy. I mean, I had some of the success. I had, taught other people. I had a large coaching business in that real estate space heading into '08. And so I really, if someone were to ask me, what's your identity? I would say I'm a business guy, I'm an entrepreneur and all that. And it's not that I don't say that now, but when all of a sudden that's either ripped away or, you make a mistake or the economy or whatever reason we want to use for the change, then you really do have to kind of question what is that identity. And so I think that was the big struggle that I went through. And, we had, I mean, we don't have to get into a lot of the ugly, but we had investors, we had people we had told, this was going to happen and it didn't. And so I think I dealt with a lot of identity issues and I dealt with quite a bit of shame. And those two, with the personality that a lot of entrepreneurs have, which is, a lot of entrepreneurs, we truthfully have to have this healthy level of denial or, delusion, because if we don't, we would never attempt to do some of the things we try to do. Well, when all of a sudden you realize maybe you shouldn't have, it starts taking, to quote an Austin Powers movie, it takes your mojo away. And so I think the thing that really I had to redefine was I had to go deeper into what my core was, not the surface level, I'm a good business guy. I can step into a situation and I could see the problems in organizations. I'm an industrial and systems engineer, so I'm a systems guy too. All of that is part of some tactical items, but my true purpose is where I had to start really defining what that was. So I'll pause here and see if, I think you said you had something to follow up there.
well, yeah,
Identity and shame were the tough things that I dealt with what many
Right.
would call a failure. I don't necessarily call it that now, but it was a failure. Let's don't beat around the bush.
Right. And it's interesting how you talk about how we as entrepreneurs have this sort of denial of reality. I think Walter Isaacson in his biographies for Steve Jobs and Elon Musk talk about this reality distortion field that, allows a visionary to sort of see way beyond the current reality. And so sometimes that enables them to see what is potential that everyone else is blind to, but sometimes it just makes them blind to reality. And so I definitely understand what you're saying there. And I understand what you're saying about the identity as an entrepreneur, as a successful business person, and the shame that goes when that bubble is burst to some extent. So how did you then go about? I want to get also, and actually my follow-up question also was, what about people who don't experience massive failure? So that can be a wake-up call for those who do, and they could redefine success in a healthier or more fulfilling way. But
Yeah,
sometimes
the
people
reason,
don't experience massive success. If they don't experience massive shame, they don't experience massive loss of identity, or however they were defining it, maybe they experience primarily affirmation of their adopted identity. Is there any hope for them to have alignment between faith or purpose and how they define success?
yeah, I think there absolutely is. I've said for some time now, I think really that there's two ways that people can make, I'll even make it even broader, significant change. I think significant change for in one's life, even with organizations, I've even noticed this actually is an organizational thing also. It occurs typically when someone makes a concerted effort to make an adjustment, change, identify more, etc. That's one way. The other way is the way I just talked about, which is something external, catalytic event, health challenge, someone close to them dies, they have an experience or a financial situation. Those are the two, I think, big ways that we see people go through a significant change in their life. And it could be a lot of things. It could be health, it could be business, it could be financial. And so ideally, people will do that first one that I talked about. They will put forth the effort to bring someone in to help, or they will spend a lot of time going through the process of identifying and becoming more self-aware. What are some things that I need to adjust? What are my strengths? Maybe what are some of my weaknesses? And then begin a systemic process of going through that. And I think you and I've talked about this before. Organizations is the same way. We're talking individual here, but it spills over to organizations. I enjoy working with leaders because I know leaders impact organizations, but we could almost interchange the two. Now, for many people, I hesitate to say all, Ben, but for many people, the way that they will do that is to begin this process of, and I think it might be important for me to define faith here. I think a lot of people, when we talk faith, they start thinking about a particular faith, a particular religion, or something like that. Let me define this real quick here so it will help our conversation. Faith, to me, the foundational root of faith is knowing without a doubt that the world does not revolve around you. That, to me, is the foundational root of faith. Now, we could go into a lot of other things after that, but I know for me and a lot of other leaders that I work with, we can sometimes get this tunnel vision and really believe that everything revolves around us. And with that, we will typically lose humility. We'll lose this ability or this desire to learn from others. We'll lose all types of things. And so probably if you go back to '08, I was a guy of faith, the church and all that. I was a follower of Christ and stuff like that. Still am, but I probably still thought that the world revolved around me. And so does that help a little bit to kind of say that a faith to me is not thinking that the world is all about you?
Yeah, no, that's very helpful. And thinking about what you said before, both about how organizations can have those same patterns as us as individuals or as business owners, and um, you talk about the ability to grow even without cataclysmic events, based on just sort of one person, whether it's one person in an organization or one person for their own life, deciding that they're going to push for change. Um, The challenge is though that for most of us and for most organizations, the will of anyone to do that won't exist 90% of the time unless there is massive pain of one kind or another. Because the reality is it's hard to make change. And if there's not a lot of pain, where the pain starts to exceed the pain of change, then most people aren't going to change. For most of the time, which is, maybe why Providence has it that a lot of people do go through a lot of pain,
But
because for
but
most of us,
one
that
quick
may be the only way that we're going to grow.
right. One quick thing about that though, Ben, I do think there's levels. I mean, when I tell my story, and I've told it before in that real quick, we were living here in 2008 and by 2013 homeless and bankrupt. And you can kind of tell I've probably compacted that to where it kind of has, like you said, it's a pretty good hook.
Well, there's 5 years
Uh,
between 2008 and 2013.
yeah. There's something else that was going on there. There's a lot of other stuff happening, and some of it was ugly, and some of it was anyway. But I do think there's levels. Like I'm thinking in particular, and I want to be careful about what I say here. There's a client that I work with that I had known for years, and this was after I had gone through a lot of, it's real interesting that the current clients that I work with, Ben, I work with a lot of leaders of organizations in both ministry and in for-profit businesses. It's a great contrast for me to learn a lot from and to gain a lot from my standpoint. But every one of them have reached out to me. It's almost like just a referral thing. And a lot of them have reached out because they know my background. They know what I've gone through. And most of them have known me for 20 plus years. They knew me way back when. They saw what I went through. And so they reached out. But there was one in particular that it wasn't what we would call catalytic, but he had a situation that I think shook him just a little bit. And I won't mention the details of it just for some discretion here, but I think people just need to have clues as to something that might be, what, I need to make a shift, I need to make a change, I need to adjust. And shortly after that, he found me. We hadn't talked in about 3 or 4 years. He had been listening to some of the podcast, and he said, "Hey, listen, I think I need you to coach me." And then started coaching him, coach the whole leadership team and things like that. So those are some things I think that are helpful, is to look for clues. And I probably had them in 06, 7, 8 that I didn't recognize. And I've kind of evaluated that. But anyway, I just want to kind of mention that there may be some small things that come up that you need to make an adjustment before they start building up.
Right. And that's true. And I think also great pain can come in different ways for different people. Sometimes maybe not fulfilling a greater purpose in life that's going to live, that's going to continue beyond my lifetime. And just knowing that can cause a great amount of pain for me. And that could be a catalyst for me, without anything horrible actually happening potentially. So there's different ways to get to that. That's why I use the word pain as opposed to failure or cataclysm, actually, that in that instance, because I think that, there's different things that could reach that threshold of pain that can be a catalyst for change for different people. But what have you learned, and what can you share with people now, I guess, about how they can go about um, realigning or aligning their life or their business with their, with their faith or with their purpose?
I think I'll go back to something I just said. Is the first thing is just to kind of recognize there's a bigger world out there. And a faith type thing is to say, listen, your situation, your problems, your things that you're going through, there is something bigger going on out there. I was just actually talking, we have a grown son. I was talking to him about this the other day, about he had a flat tire, and I was like going, listen, flat tires stink. They're no fun, but it's not the end of the world. And so I think the first thing is just an awareness. Is like, what, there's bigger out there. I think the next step that people need to go on this journey, and they could do it by themselves, or they could do it with the aid of someone. And I'm a coach, so I like to tell people a coach helps, And I think it's to do some, real reflection and assessments on who you are. One of the ones I'm loving right now is Strength Finders, the Clifton Strengths. To me, that one has a lot of value because it emphasizes the positive in the strengths. There are others out there and, check out. I mean, when I start working with someone, I typically ask them over the last 12 months, what assessments have you done? Have you done DISC? Have you done Myers-Briggs? Have you done some of the others out there? Because I just want to know if there's an awareness. And so those are the first two that I think, because I think when we start looking inside, it can start helping us evaluate, again, some of our strengths. For me, I needed to kind of flesh out some things that might be weaknesses. And one of them I've already shared with you. It was that bit of delusionalism that I had developed that I thought everyone else could collapse and fall apart and all, but it's all going to be okay for me.
So one aspect of it is starting to look for what my purpose is or what my strengths are. What else do you teach people or show people, that you've learned from your experiences when it comes to learning how to start taking maybe some of those things that they learn and aligning that with their definition of success?
Well, I think the thing that follows from there, this is one of the biggest things that I work with leaders today. And it's that we need to clear the decks and have some quiet time to kind of get all of the external, because I think the big thing that many of us do, Ben, is we attempt to compare ourselves to other people. And I think the thing that most of us need to do is attempt to push that aside so that we can identify what it is for us. And one of the things I do when I work with leaders, what we do is we just go through this process of probing to identify what's really important to them. Now, we could all identify real quickly something when we are copying someone. It's like, you know what? I want a house. I want this. And again, we talked about this before we hit record. You're talking to a guy who lives in an RV and travels around with his wife. And
Right.
so I'm sort of living the different lifestyle. But as far as the thing that occurs for most is quiet, still time, and then asking what I consider to be the difficult questions of what do you really want to achieve and accomplish with your life? What is important to you? What are the things that really matter to you? And so those are the processes I go through with the leader. Now, once I work with a leader, there's some things that spill over into an organization, but those are some things we can, if we want to discuss, we can do that too.
So let's say we get some clarity. I get some clarity as a listener or a viewer on what's really important to me, what some of my strengths are. How do I start to connect that back to how I define success, like to get us back to the beginning of our topic?
Well, if we then circle back, and this is something I see the, EOS books behind your, I use a similar process that I think you need to start applying that. I mean, I'm not someone who thinks it's just nebulous. And now that we've got to find it, let's see what's happened. I like 90-day cycles. I like strategic sessions. I like to take what we've applied and then move it forward with strategy. And I like nice, simple processes if at all possible. And so one of the things that I urge people to do is like, okay, once we've defined some of this, what does that look like as far as your personal life? What does it look like as far as your leadership life? What does that look like as far as our organization? And let's come up with a few things that we will use that to apply. I'll give you one, I guess, more tangible example here.
Uh-huh.
Let's just say that Joe Executive has come to the realization that he is not being the father that he really wants to be, big picture. Okay.
Right.
And that's unfortunately pretty common in the world we're in today. Sometimes they realize it, or we realize it early on. Sometimes we realize it later. Well, if we know that part of our purpose in life are these children and helping them be nurtured and get to wherever they need to get to. And I'm not going to do a parenting seminar here because I think there's a lot of variables there, but I think we know that spending time with children is one of the things we do. And as business people, it is so easy for us to get in this mindset of, we need to be with the company. We need to be doing this. If we generate money, then that's providing for the kids and all that. And that's all well and good. That's part of it. But one tangible example is if we decide that we need to be more present with our family and our children, then we need to begin putting things in place that make that happen. And it sounds so simple, Ben. I am sure everyone here that's listening in knows about setting goals, and they know that this is something that's needed. But unless we can look at that on the calendar and equate it, and so with a lot of the executives I work with, we'll work towards, how can you step away for 2 weeks? There's one client I'm working with now that we're discussing how they could leave their business for 2 weeks in the summer and go on an extended vacation with their family and their children that are, beginning to be in the teenage years, which is a critical time. So that's a very tangible thing. It doesn't seem like that's business, but to me, that's leadership. Now, are there other things specific? Yeah, we're also working with people that are moving towards exiting their company. So we're having to do some real tangible things with the org chart. They're recognizing that their purpose is not running this company until they're 80 years old.
Right.
And so the tangible thing we're having to do is create an org chart that doesn't look like one person and then a
The
bunch of other
center.
people below them. Yeah, it's like, come
Right.
on. It's like, so we're meeting in, early part of 2024. And, we finally come to terms. It's like, okay, for this to be a transition, we're going to have to do something different with the org chart. The people aren't there currently, but we're developing the org chart. So those are just a few things that might be a little more tangible.
Right. I get to one last question, which is, for people, maybe they don't strongly identify with a religion, or they don't really have any purpose beyond, material success, or just having good things, and, having their spouse or kids, be good, whatever. But they didn't have any particular idea about a purpose in life, or a greater mission or purpose in life, or any particular religion they're connected with. What do you say to people out there who are listening or viewing who may feel that way about themselves? So it's like, how do I align my faith or purpose with success, with my definition of success? Well, what religion, what faith, what purpose?
Yeah, and I think I'm gonna circle back to, let's look at how I will often define what faith is. It's just knowing that there's more out there than you. You've got, if you're just a single person, that's fine. But if there's family, if there's a company, if there's a business, and I- the faith piece, and I can be dogmatic. I'm not super dogmatic about this aspect. I just find that people are better leaders. You are a better leader if you really understand that there's a lot going on in the world outside of you. And so the thing that I would really encourage people to do is to just look around. Here's one that's cool. Travel a little bit. Look at all the beauty in the world and say, you know what, there's a lot out there in the world. I need to kind of have a bigger picture of things. Is it God? Is it, Jesus? Is it whatever? It maybe doesn't have to be. It's just that the world is more than just you. Every time I've worked with someone, Ben, that is so focused on them and themselves, and they don't have what I call a bigger picture, it really makes it tough to, number one, change, to number one, have them really love and nurture and take care of other people that are within their stewardship. And so I guess I would encourage them to, regardless if it's not a faith or anything like that, that one would define it as, just realize there's a bigger world out there. And, maybe that would convince, maybe it won't. I just would hope that they all of a sudden don't end up in a more catalytic situation like I
Right.
did.
They could preempt it somehow.
Maybe preempt it. Yeah, like be a little bit more offensive about that instead of be on the defense.
Right. Reactive. Well, look, Tim, I truly appreciate it. Again, timwinders.com. Anybody can get more information about your podcast, about your coaching, about your book, your novel. Just truly appreciate you making the time to speak with us today, talk about aligning faith or purpose with, how we define success. Just truly grateful to you, Tim, for making this time. And everybody else will see you on the other side. Thank you very much.
You're listening to Win Win, an entrepreneurial community with your host, Ben Wolf.